Hello, welcome to another edition of the Talking Basketball podcast. I am Mark.
I am Paul. Hello.
Hello. And we've got another guest today.
We have got the General of Portsmouth FC Basketball Club today, Mark.
The General himself has graced us with his presence.
So without any ado whatsoever, now, stand and cheer. Head coach and number 10 for Portsmouth FC Basketball Club, Dan Lloyd.
What an intro.
Welcome, Dan.
Dan, that takes you back.
That's the 2024 version of the Portsmouth Basketball Club announcer.
Dan, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Paul.
Welcome
You guys?
to the show. Yeah, very good.
Very good.
Very good. This has been one we've been really looking forward to because we've been talking to players like Colin Irish, Steve Nelson, and always talk about you with respect, maybe a little dread of some of the punishments and stuff like that as head coach. But it was it's great to get, I think, that coach's perspective of what people consider one of the great teams. Definitely in Portsmouth perspective, we look at that as one of the great teams of the BBL, almost with a sense of what could have been.
Yeah.
It's those are some heady times back then. The game itself was very popular. We were fortunate to be in a really good situation. One, having being involved with the football club and having the John Deacon as chairman of the football club taking on the basketball as well. So it was all a brand new experience down there in Portsmouth. And I'd like to think we were fairly well received down there. We ended up getting some great crowds at the Mountbatten Center, and we were also able to get some success. So things were looking up.
Brilliant. Well, Dan, as I was introducing you, I noticed in the corner of my eye, I got this picture of you. This is from 1986, and these pictures are gold dust, really. And I'll show you. You're right in the corner. I believe you're right in the corner here. That's you there, right? Sat next to Alan Cunningham.
Very well be. Yeah, that's Colin in the middle, Alan, and I'd say that's me. Yeah. Just about made the picture. Just about made that photo.
And that is a picture from, I think it'd be great just to go back before that, but that is, what some people don't realize, you actually played for the Portsmouth FC Basketball Club before you became head coach.
Yeah, it was that 85-86 season. Came down there, Danny Palmer was the head coach. He coached the team the previous year, and I think they were Division II the previous year, and they were promoted because the teams, I think, club started in Telford, and then I think Mr. Deacon, John Deacon, bought it out and moved it to Portsmouth, got in Danny Palmer as the head coach, and it kind of started from there. And then I think, 84-85, believe they were in the second division, and they may have won that, and then moved up to the first division the next year. And I think that's where Steve Nelson, I think, played with them perhaps originally in Telford, as well as Dave Harris. I think Dave Harris might have been there as well.
They were the two who came with the team.
The two that came, they came down with the club.
So let's go into that. If anyone wants to go into the full story of Dan Lloyd and his life in basketball, we do. Dan showed us earlier. You've got a book, your own book about your whole story.
Well, yeah. Part of it. That came out about 83.
Mark, we got to get that.
We got to get that in the studio.
Yeah, I think it's about 99p on Amazon.
Amazing.
Yeah,
What-
if that.
Well, Dan, take us back. How did your journey in basketball start?
Well, born and raised in Pennsylvania in the U.S. We had my dad died when I was 2, and we had four in our family, 2 brothers and a sister. So I had 2 brothers and sisters. All the brothers played basketball. My sister played basketball as well in high school. So we all played basketball. So the brothers are all a year apart. So we were continually competing against each other. And they played over here as well. My older brother, Dave, younger brother, Doug. But yeah, I played 1 year in high school, played at university, and finished university in '76, and always wanted to come over to Europe to play basketball. I knew I wasn't going to make the NBA, wasn't going to play in the NBA, but I'd heard they played basketball in Europe, so I said, man, I'd love to get that opportunity. And I wrote to some clubs, and nothing ever happened. And my brother was at a college at the time, and this agent had this leaflet going around for anybody who was interested in playing in Europe. And at that time, my brother, he wasn't interested. So I said, yeah, I'll fill it out. So I filled it out, and on the application, it says birthplace of your parents. Well, my dad was born in London. So emigrated to the States when he was young, but he never became an American citizen. And so I was born with an English father. And so this agent picked up on that, contacted some clubs and said, yep, he can come over here and play as a dual national. So having both a British and an American passport. At the time, I didn't even have an American passport, but they because of the rules, I was eligible to play as a dual national, so not as a foreign player. And so I got an opportunity contract with a club in Doncaster my first year. This would have been 78, 79. And so, I was working for an oil company at the time, handed in my notice, worked a week's notice, went home. Within about a week or so, packed my bags on my way through Philadelphia to come over here. I picked up my American passport because I didn't have one at the time. And I flew and played my first year in Doncaster.
Oh, wow.
I was a dual national. And then I was there for a year, and then I went to Crystal Palace in London and was there for 5 years, then Manchester, then Portsmouth. So
were you the first brother to come over?
Yeah, so I was the first one to come over. And then my other brother, Dave, the older one, came over the following year. And then my younger brother, Doug. Dave played for a team in Sunderland, and he played in Manchester and Hemel Hempstead. So he moved around a little bit more than I did. And my other brother, Doug, played most of his career for Kingston. So
wow.
When we played them in the Cup at the Albert Hall there with Portsmouth,
that must be great.
Yeah. Well, not so much for the result, but yeah, it was a small world. So in a nutshell, that's kind of how it came about, by my having an English father. Had I not had that, we wouldn't be talking right now, probably. So,
oh, wow.
So hold on, let me just go back if I can, Dan. So you played in the final against your own brother?
Yeah, I was coaching at the time.
Oh.
So I didn't go on court, but so he was out there.
Wow.
My older brother, Dave, and we played against each other a number of times because he played for a couple teams and I was at Crystal Palace. We played at Wembley Championships, played against each other and a few times. So
who was the better brother?
Who was of those two?
Of you two?
Well,
all three.
All three.
It goes without saying. It goes without saying. But my younger brother, Doug, was probably the most talented of all three of us. He was 6'6", so he was a bit taller. But we all had things about us. But I'd say, if you put all three of us and matched up, Doug could have been, but I think I won more trophies. The teams I was with won more trophies. So as far as I'm concerned, I was the best brother. So
Would you
but
think
they all did both. They all did well.
Would you have worked well on a team together?
Well, Dave and I played with the England team together, and Doug and I played, I think, on one tour together. So because we all had British passports, we were eligible to play for England and Great Britain. So Dave and I played a number of times with England together. So we had some good wins and
Fantastic.
and fairly successful.
That
So that
must
was
be
nice.
fantastic to be able to do that with your brothers. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Growing up together, you probably didn't really look at it that way. We probably didn't look at it as, hey man, what do you think? We're here we are playing for England. Isn't that something else? We just said, you were just playing basketball, and
That dual passport comes in handy, doesn't it?
That's
man, I'll say.
Yeah.
Still
awesome.
does when I fly back and forth to the States. I leave with the British and arrive with the American, and vice versa when I come back. So it's all legal.
I think there was a trend, though, definitely around your time, where if an American came over who did have that passport, it was great for English basketball because, that whole national setup was something that they could progress to. Even if there was just an American, I know there was several players who got dual citizenship as well, and then could come in that team. And I don't want to say it was the Bosman rule. It wasn't that, but at a certain point, once they got that citizenship from the US, then that counted as an English player, and then you can get another American to come in. Is that right? That was before the Bosman rule, from what I remember.
Yeah. So before the Bosman, you had to have a legitimate right. For example, having an English father, or a number of guys were born here in England and emigrated to the States when they were very young and grew up basically in the States. So they would have dual nationality as well. And you talk about somebody who acquired dual nationality. Alan Cunningham was one.
Yeah.
So, American, but he played over here and lived over here for so long, he ended up taking up British nationality. So he is a dual national. And Alton Bird, I don't know if you remember Alton Bird back in the day. Yeah, so he played for England. And so a number of other guys did.
It's just some of the all-time BBL greats, Mark.
They just dropped the names in there just casually. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So Dan, how did your journey start to get to Portsmouth then? So you were at Manchester at that point.
Yeah, let's say I was at Crystal Palace for 5 years, and Danny Palmer was the coach there for the last 3 years when I was at Crystal Palace.
Oh.
So he was a very successful coach there. We won, a number of trophies at Crystal Palace. And then the club kind of ran out of money, or weren't as financially sound. And so I looked for another club to go to, and Manchester was a club up, that were financially sound. Also, had good players up there, very good players up there. And so I decided, to move to Manchester, and that, as I said before, Danny then came back on the scene with the Portsmouth franchise, and so we just kind of joined up again, from there. The interesting thing at Manchester, we had some really good players there, English and American, and one of the players is actually Michelle Obama's brother.
Oh wow!
Craig Robinson.
Oh
yeah,
wow.
Craig Robinson. So, I mean, great guys. I mean, it was really, really fun. We didn't win anything there, unfortunately. We were very strong and competed well, but we didn't win any trophies, unfortunately. But I mean, obviously at the time, we're talking 84, 85, who was Michelle Obama, who was that? But it's only now, you think, oh man, I played with that guy. That's Michelle Obama's brother.
That's really cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do some supply teaching now at schools, and they say, oh, do you know anybody famous in in America? Blah, blah. I said, well, I played with I played basketball with Michelle Obama's brother. They said, oh, really? So there you go. It's a claim to fame.
That's awesome.
Hey, I would say, I'm talking about him in the third person, but Dan Lloyd is the famous person in Portsmouth.
Yes.
Easily.
Yeah, 100%.
Easily.
100%.
Well, we had a number of good players there, really good players, and good people. Good people.
So when you came to Portsmouth, was that Danny Palmer reaching out to you and saying,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I came down as both a player and kind of like a assistant coach. So I was going to kind of help with the coaching and whatever, but my main role was mainly playing, but also to help Danny with coaching in any whatever capacity I could. But yeah, I think I was probably the first player he recruited because we knew each other from Crystal Palace days.
But Danny Palmer must have seen something in you then to be like, okay, he can play, but he can also be a coach here. So he must have seen something there.
Well, funnily enough, when Danny was coaching at Crystal Palace, we shared a house together. So it was right at the Crystal Palace National Sports Center. We had one of the houses on the grounds there. So he and I shared a house for a couple of years. And so obviously got to know each other very well. And so give us the opportunity to talk about basketball all the time and players and this and that. So, we were pretty close in that respect. And I think probably had similar ideas as to, what would make a successful team and what have you. So, so we knew each other very well. So he probably felt, okay, I know Dan. I know what I'm getting when if Dan comes down here. So that's how that all came about.
And then when you actually came into Portsmouth, did you meet with John Deacon at that point? Would you be talking about contracts with John Deacon, or would Danny Palmer be dealing with that?
No, Mr. Deacon, John Deacon. We met with him. And
what was he like?
With Danny? Oh, he was a real gentleman, as you can imagine. I guess he'd be like your old school football chairman, but and I'm sure there were probably a certain portion of the people in Portsmouth weren't happy that he was investing money into a basketball club when he had the Portsmouth Football Club there. The years we were there, they were on the verge of going up to the first division. They were thereabouts. And I think people probably felt, well, if he didn't put money into the basketball, he could put it into football. We get better football players and we'd be up in the first division. So he probably took a little flack for that, but he stuck with it. And I think he was a fan of the team. Obviously, I mean, he's funding it and financing it, but I think he really did enjoy being with the basketball setup, because it's different, isn't it, from football? It's more family orientated and so on. So I'd like to think that he did. So,
and it created moments in Portsmouth we still remember today.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like as kids, we were there as kids watching the games, and we can all the lights coming down, the team coming out, and there was such a closeness between the fans and the players. I'm not talking physically, but an actual connection where you would almost have relationships with them, like, oh wow, it's Colin Irish, and then he would be coaching you off the court or the Tudor Hoot camps and all that. It felt like fans and player were very close.
Well, and that's, I think, one of the positive things about basketball in this country. Every club you play with, you there is that closeness with the fans. After the game, first of all, how close you are to the game when you're watching. As a spectator, you're right alongside the court, and you can hear what's going on and everything, and you're almost a part of it. And then afterwards, most of the places would have a bar, and so the players would go up there, and the fans are there, and they're either slap on your back, say, hey, good game and all this and that. And so there you are chatting with everybody after the game. And that was, definitely one of the best parts about playing, in England. It was not just, the competition on the court and what have you, but just the camaraderie with not just players, but the fans and everybody after the matches, and even away fans. It was a really nice, really good atmosphere. Really good atmosphere.
I think a lot of credit got to go to Alan Cunningham, because obviously former Harlem Globetrotter, he took a lot of that experience and brought it to Portsmouth, didn't he?
Oh, big time. Yeah, Alan, he's got to be one of the most famous players, in the country. Not just because he played pretty much in every, club throughout the country. So, but just his charisma, his personality, as you say, ex-Globetrotter, he had it all there, Alan. He was a great basketball player, one of the best, and but just a great personality as well. So, a real pleasure playing with Al. He was, he was something else.
Let's talk about that then. So your playing days at Portsmouth. How do you, any fond memories of that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the first year, it was, this is one of the things perhaps I didn't agree with Danny. He wanted we had about 15 full-time players on the team. So, and they weren't making huge amounts of money, but he brought a number of players down from London, young players, and, so they had accommodation, and they were getting a little, some money each week to play. And so very unusual for English basketball, but he thought, okay, this is what we'll do. We'll have 15 players, and what that will do would create competition within the team. So players will work harder, because you had like a bonus if you were selected for the team, like a football. So we were treated like football players, which is basically unheard of in basketball at the time. And unfortunately, I don't think it had that an effect, because I think the young guys thought, hey, man, this is great. I'm down here in Portsmouth, making a little bit of money. I got accommodation. I'm kind of in the big time, and they really hadn't earned it yet, if you know what I mean. And so, I don't think I don't think it was had a positive impact on the team, because it didn't create that competition that Danny was hoping it would. The other thing in the first year, it was Alan's situation. See, now he was an American, foreign player, and we had Calpatrick Wells. I don't know if you remember Calpatrick Wells.
Yeah.
Great, he was a great player, a big man, 6'9", 6'10", a real strong player. So he was an American. And then, we had Colin Irish, myself. So we were dual nationals. Joel Moore, English player. And as the season wore on, Danny felt we needed another guard. We needed a quality guard as well. So what he did, he brought in this player named Jose Slaughter, who was a very good player. I don't know if you remember that name at all, but he was very talented. From
there he is.
Is he in there somewhere?
He's the one
Slaughter
running towards Larry Bird, shooting a three on him.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, he must have played in the NBA. So he obviously a quality player, but that means somebody had to sit.
Yeah.
And it ended up being Alan, because Calpatrick Wells was the center. He was the big guy. Jose Slaughter, guard, and so that meant Alan wasn't playing. Couldn't play in the games.
Oh, because you can only field two players. Oh,
two foreign players. Yeah, you can only have two foreign players, and I think that.
Sorry, is that in the team or the roster?
No, the team. So
Okay.
to dress, I mean, so Alan was still on the Portsmouth basketball team, but he couldn't play in any of the games if we played both Jose Slaughter and Calpatrick Wells.
Got it.
And it, you know, Alan is just he's a great player, big personality, and I think it kind of fragmented the team rather than gelling it. And so it's I don't think that was the best thing to do. We probably should have thought about, when we put the team together, thinking more about who to get to cover ourselves at all those positions. But because I think Joel Moore might have even picked up an injury, which resulted in us having to bring in an American guard because Jose came over mid-season, and so consequently, we didn't win anything as a basketball club that year, despite all the money that was invested in having 15 full-time players, having this and having that. So I think it had the reverse effect on the club as a whole, performance-wise. So and I think what Danny did with the radio show there, he said, look, if we don't make Wembley, the Wembley Championships at the end of the year, and that's where the top 4 teams play off, he goes, I'm going to resign. Well,
wow.
Yeah, we didn't make Wembley, and so you can imagine, everybody's looking at Portsmouth. Oh, look at Portsmouth Basketball Club. They got all this money down there, that all these players, and we didn't make the cup final. We came in 3rd in the league, and we didn't make Wembley. So I remember I was at home there, and I get a call from Danny, and he says, hey, Dad, I just resigned. I'm like, Danny, would you do that?
Through on because of what he said on the radio show? He followed through
because they said, well, wow. I said if we didn't make Wembley, I was going to resign. Yeah, but Danny, you don't have to do that. And hung up. And then, not long after that, John Deacon rings me. He says, hey, I just had a call from Danny Palmer. He's resigned. And so it's like, oh man, what a season. It was. And so I thought, okay, right, man, I'm 30, going on 31. Do I try to play for another coach, or, because I had a 3-year contract, and a couple of the other guys had maybe 2-year contracts or whatever. And so I said, okay, right, let me throw my hat in the ring to coach. I'll offer to coach the team the next year. So, and that's what happened. So the following year, I was made head coach, and then our budget was all of a sudden cut big time, because previous year the first year we had like 15 players, full-time players. Mr. Deacon said, right, Dan, you got 10 players and you're one of them. So, and you're coaching. So I was like, man, I didn't want to be a player coach, because, man, that's hard, too hard. I can only focus really on one thing. So we basically had 9 players and myself as the 10 the following year. So,
wow. So why did John Deacon?
That's when the stress levels all of a sudden went through the roof.
So why did John Deacon, do you think, gave you the role? What do you think he picked you above everyone else for that role?
Well, first of all, I don't know who else applied for it. As far as obviously nobody was. Hey, Dad, I'm applying for the role. I'm applying for the job as well. So I don't know who else did. I know the England coach, guy named Bill Besick. He was the England team coach, and so we had a chat. I say, hey, Bill, man, I'm not sure what I want to do next year. Do I want to play? Do I want to try play another year or two, or coach or whatever? And so I I think he would have thought about applying for the job. And I think at some stage I said, well, yeah, Bill, I think I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to coach it because, as I said, I'm 30, going to be 31. I can't carry on playing forever. So, and he said, well, Dan, well, if you're going to give it a go, I'm not going to apply. So,
oh, well.
Yeah. So, that's how that all kind of came about. And so it was then trying to build a team again from where we were. And we had a much reduced budget because the next year we started the year with only one American, a guy named Danny Williams. I don't know if you remember, you got his name down. Yeah. So we had one American. Now, having said that, Colin Irish had a 2-year contract. So he came back. Alan Cunningham had a contract, and Joel Moore had a 2-year contract. So from the previous year, as far as the key players are concerned, those 3 guys were returning. So, which are not 3 pretty good players to have coming back.
Yeah.
That helped a lot. So, and it was just building up, getting the players, to fill in around, those guys.
I tell you what, I've got to say that I've got a picture in front of me, which is you're on the bench, Colin Irish is on the bench, and Alan Cunningham is in a suit. Now knowing what you've just said, that makes so much sense that he's on the bench trying to be part of the team.
Yep.
But what
that would have been that year.
Yeah, what he's going through, like, man, I want to play in the team, but he's still on the bench helping everyone out. Like at this moment, he's holding something out to Colin Irish, trying to show it to him, saying this is what you should do. It's amazing what someone, or like what you've just said, changes that picture completely.
100%. That is, but a context on that I never would have considered. Never in a million years would have considered that.
Yeah. And that's the thing about Alan. I mean, you're not going to find anybody who wants to win more than Alan does. At anything, anything, any game, anything, he wants to win, and he'll do whatever he can to make sure he does. So, he would a really tough guy to keep off the court. So that's what made that first year, I think, he was hurting because, he's a great basketball player. I say one of the greatest ever to play over here in this country. And he's a personality. And so here's a guy who wants nothing more than to be out there playing. I mean, and Alan is a blue collar. He's a blue collar player, a blue collar background, say Harlem Globetrotter. And he just, his work rate is phenomenal. And to all of a sudden deny him that opportunity to get out there on the court and play and win, it is just, you can imagine how much that hurt.
He had something to prove next season, didn't he?
Yeah. And, he did. He was our captain the next year. So I said, right, Alan, you're going to be the captain, because he's like an elder statesman, certainly all the young guys looked up to him, and he's that player to look up to because he just works so hard and wants to win. So
what was it like for you going through that transition of being a player to being the coach? Because I'm just trying to think, like at that level, you want to, as coach, make sure you've got the respect of all the players.
Yeah.
And it must be a very difficult transition going from player, as I'm your teammate, to now I'm in charge, I'm running the ship.
No, absolutely. That's why I said the stress levels just went through the roof. It was, I'm thinking, okay, man, I'm at one of the premier clubs, in the country, Portsmouth. And so people are looking at that club and saying, okay, what are you going to do? What's going to happen down there now? You got this opportunity. And, so I said, trying to find players that I felt would fit in and make us successful, because we had to win something. we have to win down here. We can't just go, have all this investment and not at least get a trophy somewhere along the line or what have you. So my first player I picked up was Carl Tatum. He was
legend.
He was the first guy I called, and I said, okay, man, because we had Joel Moore, and Joel, he may be, certainly back in that era, the best English guard. And there are some good English guards. You got Paul Stimson, you got McBeth, you got a number of other guys. I'm not, because I can't think of them right off the top. But Joel was right up there. He was one of the best, but he was young, and I felt we needed to have a good, solid, kind of another point guard there who could kind of mentor Joel, and Carl, from my perspective, was that person. That was that person, and so he was playing I think at Leicester or Manchester. I think it might have been Manchester actually that year, and so we brought him down, and he was the guy I went to. Okay, right, Carl, this is what we got. Who do we need? Where do we go from here? So the next guy wanted to bring down was Mike Spade, and he was at Hemel, and so Englishman, a dual national. He was born in England but grew up in the States. 6'10". So got Allen as one of our forwards, Colin Irish as another forward wingman. So we got Mike Spade as a big man, and got Carl and Joel at the guards. So you got a pretty good five right there, And
I'm getting goosebumps with Dan just talking about this, knowing of the players of the caliber that you're talking about, and you're the one bringing these all together. I'm getting goosebumps you just talking about it.
Well, I had a lot of sleepless nights, Paul. So you have goosebumps. I don't know if I had goosebumps, but I had sleepless nights thinking, okay, man, how are we going to get these guys in here? How are we going to make this a team? And the guys carrying over. So a lot of, because I said we had 15 full-time players that first year. And so John Deacon says, right, you're going to have to cut those guys. You can only have this number the next year at a reduced budget. So a number of players that we had that first year had to go. And so I had to think about, okay, who are we going to keep, as the young players. And Steve Nelson was one, and Joe White, and I'm trying to think who else. Eddie Fontaine. We had a guy named Eddie Fontaine. He was we kept him from the previous year. So that's 3, plus those other guys, 8, and Danny Williams makes 9. Jason Colgan, he was the young guy from Portsmouth. He came up through the junior program. So he was, I think, either the first or second year, but he was another player that we had. So I mean, and he had no experience in the NBL at the time, so BBL. So that was our team. And because it took a while to get players in and what have you, we started preseason probably with about 6 guys.
Oh, wow.
7 players, because for various reasons. So, man, it was hard. It was hard.
Dan, you mentioned going to teach people like Mike Spade from Hemel, etc. Was there any players? Who was the one who got away? Can you think of a player that you thought, we really want them, but you just couldn't get them?
Well, you know what, Mark, those are the only ones that I went for, because,
wow,
we already had Colin and Alan and Joel. So I'm looking, okay. And I had to be one of those 10. So I'm not including myself in this, because I'm thinking, I'm just gonna get players that I can try to work with and coach and what have you. So I don't want to have to worry about me trying to compete as well, which, right or wrong, maybe I should have thought about that more, but I thought, right, well, if I'm going to be coaching now, which is now where my career is going, I got to focus on coaching. I can't, worry about my playing game as well, because that one or the other is going to suffer. They're not both of them. I wasn't going to be like a Steve Bontrager. Steve Bontrager was a player coach, but man, he ran the show. He was a guy who just ran the show out there with Kingston. And that wasn't me. So,
did you play at all?
To be honest, sorry?
Did you play at all in that year, or were you just like, no, I'm coaching? You were suited up. You were suited up from what I did suit up. Yeah.
Yeah, I did suit up, but I played very little, very little. And I only suited up in case there was an injury or somebody fouled out or something like that. As okay, I have to go on, I'll go on. But if I don't have to, I'm not going to. I mean, I'd put Steve Nelson out there first, Joe White, I'd have those guys playing, Eddie Fontaine, because, that's just the way my approach at that time was.
Do you think player coach could ever work?
Well, yeah, I mean, because there have been some good ones. Steve Bontrager, for one, he was a player coach, and at Kingston, and they won trophies there. So in the right circumstance, yeah, it can work, but it certainly wasn't for me, because I wouldn't have been able to do it. So, but no, you don't see it that often. Only in rare occasions, and then normally the player coach was going to be somebody like a Bontrager, or somebody who's going to control the ball, have the ball the majority of the time, and everybody plays off of that person. So that wasn't going to be me.
So were these early sessions as bad as the players tell us? These training sessions.
Bad in terms of what? Poorly run?
No. It's in the sessions that
punishing.
It's talked about as the most brutally toughening training sessions that they ever did.
Well, I mean,
Dan's like, this is just a normal workout.
No. Well, these guys are professional, and we had I certainly felt the pressure that, man, we got to win, and we got to get together as a team ASAP, because if we're going to win anything, we got to be ready come game day one. And so, as I say, our preseason, what was great about being at Portsmouth, so we had the naval bases there. And so we had some contacts at the naval bases. And so we would go maybe to one of the bases, I can't remember some of the names of them now, not far from Fareham in Gosport Way.
I know the one you're talking about. I don't know the name.
But you got Tamarara and Nelson.
No, that's the one, Fareham Way. But I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah, and so
big place.
We got
really big place.
They have PTIs, they're physical training instructors, and so we would just I'd say, hey, right, can you do a training session for us? An hour of physical training, and they would do it. They loved it. They said, yeah, okay, yeah, bring them in, and they'll put them through the paces. So that was great. So I knew, fitness wise, having PTIs from the Navy, taking care of some of those sessions, and then we'd have the basketball session. So it might be 2 a days. We might have 2 training sessions a day preseason, and so it's all right. It's going to get us ready physically, and the basketball wise, we'll work on that stuff at the other session. So, and I guess because of the pressure of feeling, I mean, we got to win. And these guys are good players. I mean, they're all, they won't shy away from working hard, and any of those guys. So they all worked hard, and because they wanted to win, they wanted to have a winning team. So that's what was really good about having those guys there.
Was it HMS Sultan?
That rings a bell. And was there one that begins with a D?
Daedalus.
Daedalus rings a bell. Yeah, that's it. But
there's a lot of Navy stuff around it.
Yeah. So and I thought that was a really good opportunity, because they did circuit training with them and all this and that. So they got a good workout, and they're professional players, and I think they enjoyed that as well, because it was something different. It wasn't just on a basketball court running up and down. These guys are doing all this other stuff with them, circuit training and what have you. So it was good. And they pushed each other, especially Colin Irish, Alan Cunningham, Mike Spade, the older guys, Carl Tatum. They push each other. If somebody starts lightening up, they'd be right on them. Hey, come on. So it was good.
Yeah, even the players talk about those sessions now, just saying they were brutal. I don't know if they look back as fondly as you do.
I was laughing because you were saying, oh no, they really enjoyed being pushed. We've interviewed Colin and Steve and Jason. That wasn't the feeling I got, that they were like, we're enjoying this. Like, oh no, we've got another of those sessions. It's going to hurt.
No.
But they all said the same thing. That's what made them.
Oh, 100%.
That's what made them, brought the team together, and that's what really pushed them to be in the position where they could have been in when the season started.
And I think, Dan, it's, got to say thank you even at this point in the interview, because the context that you've put around how important it was for the Portsmouth team to have that connection and to work as a team and to be successful, given what had happened in those previous years, because
it's the architecture. We're talking to the architect of it, isn't it now?
Exactly, because looking back historically, whenever we've looked at some of these interviews and going just back through Portsmouth's archives and the history, yes, we were there and we saw some of the games, but obviously we were tiny. But lots of that history, it's very difficult to capture it and to understand what is the context of why was this season so important and why were these changes occurring, and how come you've got someone like Alan Cunningham in a suit on a bench when we all know how talented he is as a player. So just to understand that, it adds so much context for us to see why the season that you then are taking your main coaching position is I mean, that's not too much pressure at all, really, is it?
Well, I remember losing it one time. I just felt that some of the guys from the previous year may have been a little bit spoiled, and so they had these contracts, and the younger guys, and so there were a couple of them who hadn't signed their contract for that second year. My first year coaching for that year, they hadn't signed it, and they're saying, I want this and that. And they haven't done anything. These are the young English guys, and they haven't won anything. They haven't done anything. And so I'm just sitting there thinking, man, listen to these guys. They haven't, what have they done to deserve, a better contract, or, better than what they're getting? Because there's no way they would have gotten anything like that anywhere else in the country, no doubt about it. So, and I just felt, I think it was a Friday, and we were at school out there near Stubbington. We were training there, and I was just getting really fed up, and I'm trying to hold everything in because it's my first year. Okay, Dan, don't, But so I walked in, and maybe one or two of the senior guys as well were kind of being like, this or the snap. So I went in there and I said, hey, right, you want that? You want that contract? Okay, so give me that contract. I'm just going to tear it up, and you go somewhere else. And I said, all I know is I got a 2-year contract, so I'm good for this year and next year. Nobody else has one of those. So if you don't start playing ball, you can start looking for another club. And there was no way some of these guys were going to get what they got at Portsmouth anywhere else. And so I just flew off. And it was like, I think probably the only time I think I really did that, but I felt the pressure preseason. We didn't have everybody there. I'm thinking, man, we're not going to be ready. I don't think we had our American in yet. Danny Williams hadn't come in yet. And if I were a player, I'd be looking at this, hey man, this is kind of bullshit. Where's our American? Where's this? Where's that? Where's our team? How are we going to compete when we don't even have this and that? But so I was feeling all that, and I said, all right, this is how it is. And so left him to it, and I think certainly the younger guys probably thought, okay, man, if this guy tears up my contract, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? They go back to South London. They go back to London because a lot of them played at Crystal Palace, but Palace didn't have any money. Nobody was going to take these guys and give them a contract. End of story. There's no way it was going to happen. So I think they got the idea. Okay, right. I better sign, and I better commit myself to this and work and try to make this happen. But so. Yeah, I didn't lose it very often, but I remember that this one time it just built up, and I just had to let loose, and it was so.
Bit of tough love.
You need to do it.
Hey, look, okay. Hey, it's not like it's my way or the highway, but I'm just telling you, if things don't work, you're all looking for another job. I have another year left. I think maybe Alan might have had a 3-year contract as well, but the rest of them. They'd have to look for somewhere else. But fortunately, it did come together. And I remember the first game, I think one of the first games we had that year was against Kingston. And they were going to be our rivalry. They were going to be the team we had to beat. And I think we ended up losing that game. I think it went into overtime, if I got the right year. And I think we ended up losing like close to 9 points. And so on aggregate, so we'd play, at the end of the year, we gotta beat them by more than 9 if we're, and I'm pretty certain that was the year, and we ended up doing that. We ended up going up to Kingston, and I think we beat them by close to 20, and we won the league that year. And at the beginning of the first game of the season, we lose in overtime to Kingston, and it's like, oh man, wait a minute, here we go again. So that's where I got all this white hair. You see, before that, it was brown, blonde, and the 87, 88 season, it just turned white. So.
Dan, you still got hair. I'm jealous. So you're fine.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned the players saying about where's our American. Now, we've heard from Colin and obviously yourself now about not the reliance, but the way in which the teams had to be staggered around having the Americans come onto the team. How did you find the American talent, or how did that come to the team?
Through agents, basically. Yeah, because we didn't have the funds really for me to fly over to the States and travel around and try to find an American to sign. So I went through agents that I knew of or am aware of, and I didn't know that many. For me, they had to be a certain caliber, but I just felt, really the nucleus of the team was going to be Colin, Allen, Carl, Joel, Mike Spade. So I knew if I had these 5 guys, I got a strong team there. And then you got Eddie Fontaine, Steve Nelson, Joe White, all young guys, so they're inexperienced. So, you can't put all your eggs in one basket, just those 5 guys. So you need to get an American as well. But so yeah, it's through an agent, and you're hit and miss, really. And Danny Williams, again, really nice guy, worked hard, no issues, this and that. He wasn't the most talented of American players, and you're looking back now, I'm thinking, well, could I have brought Patrick Wells back? He would have been a great big man to bring back. But I don't think I would have had the money to do that. No way we would have been able to offer him what he had his first year. So I think that was pretty much a no-go right from the start, because Danny wasn't going to be on a big contract. He would have been making less than probably a number of those other English guys. So,
and we got to say, Colin Irish, when we spoke to him, he said that game in Kingston in that first season, that loss set the tone for the rest of the season. He was like, because they thought we should have beaten them, and then that just set the tone. He was like, from that point on, everything, I wouldn't say it was clear sailing, but it set the tone for the rest of the season.
Well, it's a hell of a way to start, and it certainly might start my first season as head coach. I think it might have been the first or second game. It was early on, and as I say, I'm pretty certain it was an overtime game, and we lost to them. And it's like, oh man, So, and I remember, I don't know. I think we had everybody there. I'm just trying to think what the deal was there. Maybe even we didn't have Danny Williams yet. I'm not sure, but yeah, it was a tough way to start. And speaking of Colin, I mean, he had 2 fantastic years with us. He was instrumental in us winning. Well, we did get the 2 league trophies, but he was injured both years the week before the cup finals, and both times it was a hand injury, and both times I think it was against Hemel Hempstead, and it was like a week before the cup final, playing at the Royal Albert Hall. Here we go, he's our leading scorer, and he goes and gets injured, and to go into a cup final with really, we don't, and so we started Steve Nelson. I remember I think the first year we started Steve Nelson, who had very little, BBL experience prior to that. And so here he is starting a cup final in the Royal Albert Hall against Kingston, So talk about pressure for a kid, It's like, sorry, Steve, man, you got to get out there. So we don't have anybody else really. So, but he, Colin had so many great games, and one in particular I remember from him was when we played up at Murray International, again the second season, and they were, it was between us and them, I think at the time, maybe to win the league. Anyway, he just tore them apart. Colin just tore him apart. We won the game going away, I think, again, double figures at least. And I think that win, we won the league up there, because I think we ended up all jumping in at the sports center. There was a swimming pool or baths or something, and we all kind of jumped in the baths afterwards because we knew we'd won the league. I'm pretty certain. It's a while ago now, but I just remember watching him out there and said, man, they can't stop him. He was just a force. And, he had a couple of really, really good years with us, and, instrumental in whatever we did. So, another great player who did not like to lose. He didn't like to lose either. And that was key. We had guys out there, Carl Tatum, Alan, Colin, they did not like to lose. They were really, mentally strong and just, really, really good basketball players. So that was big for us.
And I don't know if this is silly to say just from a fan perspective, but almost every player was a fan favorite, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, it wasn't. I just like one player. It was, I like that. Oh, but I like they. Oh, but then in that game, it's just the team.
And we got to say Carl Tatum. God rest his soul.
Yeah.
What a great player he was in Portsmouth.
and again, a great person. If you're building a club and you want, good people as well as, good players, he's right. He's in that group. He's a real gentleman, straight up, is unselfish, very unselfish, and again, he would push players. I remember, out there training sessions one time, they'd be doing a little bit of scrimmaging, playing, and Colin might have said something, and Carl would just say, just play, don't do this or that, just play, and they just got on with it and played, and it was it helped having Carl there, definitely. So
yeah, Dan, I've got the league table in front of me from the 86-87 season. Portsmouth FC top of the table with 47 points. Kingston Kings, they were called, second with 42 points. So that's how close it came like in that season. So it was in aggregate points that gave Portsmouth the first championship it's seen.
Yeah, I think we had to beat them to win it.
Yeah.
So they had. I'm trying to think who they had. That Dan Davis, Bontrager. I think brother Doug was there. Colin McNeish. They had a number of good players there.
You must have known something with your brother. You must have been like, Colin, whisper this in his ear, or give him a nudge. You must have been able to say something on your brother.
Well, no, on one of the games, I think it may have been that year. The tactic was Steve Bontrager was their key man, and he was going to have the ball 80% of the time. He was going to bring it up court, shoot it, whatever. He was their main man. So our tactic was right. Make him give the ball up, and when he gives it up, don't let him get it back again. And it just forced, their other guys to kind of run the show, which they weren't used to. And that was, I think that was the first year, because we had Joel. It was Joel and Carl, and they did such a great defensive job on Bontrager that won the game for us, really. From my perspective, I mean, it was a long time ago, but I just kind of remember that being a key tactic, and they just did a great defensive job on him, and that made all the difference.
How good was Steve Bontrager?
Oh, he was such a influential player. He's he could win virtually any game for you, because he was just a great scorer, very smart, and you couldn't leave him open. His range was phenomenal. So he's just one of the all-time great scoring guards in this country. Absolutely. So and again, a really nice guy as well. There were some real personalities back in those days, real personalities. So but yeah, he's up there. And again, his cohort there was Dan Davis was their American guy. He's about 6'7", 6'8", great player as well, very strong. I don't know if you remember that name at all from back in the day, but he was, he was special as well. So they had a really good, they were a very successful team. So
I think it was Steve Nelson who said with Steve Bontrager, it was so difficult to guard him because he couldn't predict what he was trying to do. He was unpredictable.
And he would just draw fouls. He was so clever with the ball that he was if you were going to try to stop him, he would draw that foul on you. So if he missed a shot, he was going to get the call somehow or other. So he's just, one of those scoring guards that he was going to beat you one way or another. If you leave him open, he's going to hit it. If you try to cover up, defend him too closely, he's going to draw the foul. So, and I don't know if the other thing I think what was certainly I was kind of proud of our team back in that day. I think we may have led the league in defense both years. Certainly one of those years. I'm I think we were first or second in defense, and I know that for me that was I don't know if you have that to hand at all, but
Dan, the stats from you can't get any of the stats. Like all the stuff that we have was basically we managed to get from a guy who called Scoop. He was a journalist at the time, and he's just got a sponge for a brain and just absorbed it just by seeing it. And it was about 30 years later he wrote it all down, which is the Portsmouth FC Basketball Club wiki page now. He went to detail of fixtures. If you go onto the Wikipedia, type Portsmouth FC Basketball Club, that is literally, he's done that from memory.
Right.
So
who's that?
As a guy, you probably wouldn't know him. He was in the stands watching all the games.
He wasn't working for a paper then?
He was working for the news. His name was Paul, but we all called him Scoop.
Okay.
And he did that from memory, and that is a lot of the information.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, though sad, that's a lot of the information that we have stat-wise. Like you go back and you can't see MVPs and things like that.
It's really difficult to find that stuff. I mean, especially nowadays we're spoiled. We can just say, well, we were doing one earlier and just pulling up stats about how many missed shots they had or second chances on a shot on a game that happened like 8 minutes before. And we've got all that information to our hands. Because we're spoiled for that. But there's just not even these basic records. Which is such a shame, really, isn't it?
I remember we had Cliff was our statistician.
Cliff Fulbrook.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to get him on the show. He's going to come on at some point, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I saw him a couple of years ago when I was with Reading. He was with the Solent team. He was at the Solent game there anyway.
Still is.
So we got a chance to catch up. Man, there's a name from the past as well. Cliff Fulbrook, that's it.
Yeah, no, he's very much he's wears red in Solent, very much. I try to persuade him to come back to blue, but I mean, he must have. I'm trying to get Cliff on because he would have loads of stories, loads of insight as well around that time. I got to ask you because when we were talking to Steve Nelson, he spoke about a game in particular where you subbed him in and he was on the sideline as he came in. Do you know what I'm going to say when I say this? No. Okay. No. So he had like long, popper trousers on. And as he pulled them down, he pulled his shorts down as well. You then called a timeout. And Steve was quite embarrassed, was like, I had no idea what was said in that timeout. What was said in that timeout? Can you remember?
No, I don't remember that. I don't remember that that incident. If that was my first year, it's because I was probably just so intent on, man, what am I going to do? What am I going to do next? What am I going to, what's going on? Now, Colin, did you speak to Colin about that?
Can't remember what Colin said.
Because Colin and Steve had a really good relationship back in the day. I mean, Colin used to take the mick out of Steve regularly. But they had a good relationship, so I'm sure Colin would have, if he was there, he would have seen it and he would have said something, no doubt about it. Or Alan, definitely.
Okay, so, that's the one thing.
Interesting.
Steve was embarrassed and was like, I cannot remember what was said in that timeout, and we both looked at each other and we'd love to know what Dan said in that timeout. But it's interesting you were so focused on the game you didn't see what.
Oh man. Yeah, I couldn't take time to enjoy anything because from the opening tip to the final whistle, the only thing on my mind was what's going on the court, and it's everything else would have been a blur.
So you've taken the team, Dan, and under your coaching, you've won that championship from a team that needed to prove something.
Yeah.
What was that conversation with John Deacon like once you won that championship? Going in, knowing that you'll have another season.
I think once we won the league, I mean, we were okay. celebrations, but we still had Wembley playoffs coming up. So again, that's great. We won the league. Okay, now we got to get ready for Wembley. So it was like I couldn't even think about anything apart from trying to get the team. And then we go to Wembley that first year, and we lose to BCP, Crystal Palace in semifinal, and and they had some really good players there. They had some Crystal Palace players that I know from playing at Crystal Palace. Plus, they had two Americans, Dale Roberts and Brian Kellybrew, and they just they played such a great game. Though it was we struggled, and so if I look back, I probably remember more the losses than I do the wins. I remember they're playing at the Albert Hall, Colin not playing. In the first year, Colin had he hurt his hand. And I just remember looking down the bench, and he was dressed, and I say, hey, Colin, man, what do you think? Do you think you can do anything? He says, he says, I'll try, I'll try. And so I put him out there, and it was the worst thing I could have done. I shouldn't have put him out there because it was unfair on him, certainly, because he couldn't, it was his right hand. He probably couldn't even hardly catch the ball or throw it or whatever. And you could see, like, after a minute or 2 minutes, like, man, no, he can't do it. So I, good on him for saying, man, I'll try. I'll try. And he wanted to get out there, and he shouldn't have. And then he goes and does it the next year. Goes and gets hurt. So it's like, oh man, great. So so I look back, and I know we got those league trophies, which are I'm really happy about. But I think about other games that got away, and whatever, and because of my naivety as a coach, new coach, championship games we should have won and we didn't. And I think, okay, Dan, what could you have done? What should you have done different to change things and what have you? So, and it would bring probably to that one against that Yugoslavian team we played. And
this was the next season.
Sorry?
This was the following season, 87-88. That's when you went into the European Cup.
Was that the...
Is that the team where you went to Czechoslovakia?
No, it wasn't Czechoslovakia. We went to... We played... maybe this, I'm thinking of the first year. We played Šibenik, who were from Split. In what is now Croatia, but then Yugoslavia, and we won by close to 20 at home. And we must have gone into Europe the second year. I don't remember what we have you got any?
I've got these are notes actually that Jason Colgan gave me. It says a Czech professional basketball club based in the city of Brno. And they were called... Right. There's no way I'll be able to say that. Brno is what it is.
BRNO?
BRNO.
Zbrojovka.
Yeah.
Zbrojovka Brno.
God, I can't even remember that.
It's a memorable experience for you, Dan.
Well, maybe I did punish those guys after that game. I don't know, maybe because we probably should have won that one. I remember the one after Šibenik. That must have been the first year we went to Split in what was then Yugoslavia. Brno. I'm trying to think of that one.
Is there a game, Dan, that you're thinking of specifically that is that one that sticks in your mind then? That you think, I wish I did it differently?
Is there a game?
Yeah. Is there one of those games?
Yeah. It was against Murray International. and it was a championship game, and it might have been like a league trophy or something. So it was like so you had to play. It wasn't the cup final. That was different. This was kind of like a league trophy of some sort. Man, I'll tell you that still burns. It was, I think we were up close to 20 at halftime, and I mean we were playing really well. So we go in at halftime, and guys are probably thinking, okay, game's over. We got this, and that, and me, I'm like, man, no, it's not until we hear that, not until that final buzzer is it over. And then we went out and we lost the game in the second half. The next thing you know, it's tie game, and I'm sure if I'd had a bit more experience, I might have been able to stop that from happening. But it was that still hurts. That one still hurts. So and so that would have been a second trophy, which we should have won, and we didn't. So that's the one that.
What was the defeat?
That hurts.
What was the defeat by? Do you remember? Was it points wise?
Oh, it would have been like close. It would have been, because they say we were up like close to 20 at halftime. So they came back, and it probably was. And then we played them in the final at Wembley, and we lost to them at the final at Wembley. So, and again, is there something else I could have done differently in that game? And anyway, yeah. See, I remember those games more than I do the other ones we won. But
there was the saying
anyway,
that Mick used to have, wasn't it, about the winning being the difference of if it's a close game, it was the coaches and the players.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
It was.
I'm just interested if Dan would agree with that.
Probably it was in. Oh God, how far back are we going? In the noughties, like the 2004, 2005, Mick Byrne was head coach of a National League team. And what Mark's referring to, he said to me once, he said, Paul, if you lose by 10, 20, it was the player's fault. If you lose by 1, it was the coach's fault. What do you think about that statement?
Yeah, no, I can see the logic in that. It's you have more of a say when it's a close game. You have more control over perhaps certain things, whereas if it's 10-20, you've done your job. Players have gone out there and done it, and so it's them playing. But yeah, when it comes down, that was a couple of points. So thank you for that. That's makes me feel a whole lot better.
I know when we listen to some of the games and you listen to the commentary, and I know Paul really is always fascinated by the psychology behind what coaches say to their players at half time. And if, for example, you've just said when your team is up, what is it you do to keep people focused? In the same way, what is it you do for people if you were down 20 and you want to get back into it? Because in the BBL this year, we've seen some real games where the first half you think it's over, and even a couple of games this week we thought, oh, you turn off halfway through. The second half, they come out the gate third quarter and it's a different team.
Yeah.
And I always wonder what are those conversations
that coach has got their contracts out and he's like, I'm about to rip this up. I'm about to do a Dan Lloyd. I'm going to rip this up.
You want to play that next game? You better start playing this game first.
That's brilliant.
Dan, I should have come up with that.
Dan, I apologize. I think I know what story you were about to say, and I interrupted you. You were going to go into the story about Portsmouth when they were in Europe, and you played at home and won by 20, and that's where I interrupted you, because that's a great story.
Yeah. Well, so when you mentioned Steve Nelson mentions about punishing him, I remember that game. We beat this team.
He remembers it.
They're one of the top, Yugoslavian teams, and Yugoslavian basketball is, as you well know, is good basketball there. And so we're playing them at home, and it's early in the season because it's the first round of the games, I believe. And we're playing really well. And this team, I'm looking at this team and thinking, man, these guys aren't that good. And I've looked down at the coach, and he's not really getting too excited. And I'm thinking, man, he's handling this very well, because he was like a top Yugoslavian coach. He had a reputation. So I thought, okay, this is good. Okay, we should be able to get through this next round. We just go to Yugoslavia. We make it a close game at least. So we went on aggregate. Well, we're down 20 at halftime, and I'm like, man, how did that happen? And I mean, we were just getting pretty much beat up out there. They had two, from what I can remember, Eastern European referees, and and it was like, no matter what we tried to do, it wasn't working. And Danny Williams, bless him, out there, he was just lost. It was like, it was first year over in European basketball, first year. He's just come out of college in the States, and then he's subjected to playing in Yugoslavia against these guys, and the referees they're just letting stuff go. I just remember it was we were hard done by their refereeing, but we still should have done better than we did. So, needless to say, we lost that game. So we're out of Europe. And because we had an extra day there at Split, beautiful, beautiful part of the world. And we had an extra day because of the travel arrangements or whatever. And, I did the next day, I didn't really, we didn't train or anything. I said, I'll give these guys a day off. Because again, we only had 9 players. And so only 6 or 7 of them played the bulk of the game, so they would have been hurting. So we had that extra day in there. I said, okay, right, man, we got to do something now, because we got a game on the weekend. I think we were playing Sunderland, and they were it was going to be an easier game on the weekend, fortunately. So I said, okay, right. So I went with Brian Deacon, was like kind of our general manager. He was John Deacon's son, stepson's son. And so we just walked around. I'm saying, okay, right, man, what can we do? We didn't have a court. So, okay, we're going to do some fitness training. So I just remember we came up this, and there's like this little hill, say little hill. It was a pretty steep hill up. I said, okay, right, we're going to get these guys out here. We're going to do some running. And so, I'm sure after the game, Yugoslavia, they probably had a few beers, and maybe even the next night or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, so right, let's go. So we jogged over this place. Okay, pair up and run to the top, and then jog back down, go in pairs. And I don't know how many times we did it, but they were, puking up, and all the beer they had was definitely coming out after that session. And so, okay, right, man, we got this game on the weekend. We better not, you better go in there with the right frame of mind, and blah, 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 blah. And needless to say, yeah, we won easily on the weekend, but we should have anyway. But that's when Steve mentioned about being punished. That's the one I remember. But Czechoslovakia, I'll have to look at that again. Yeah, maybe I got something somewhere. If I have any stuff from back in the day, I'll send it down to you.
Oh, amazing.
I'm sure I do. I'm sure I got something. I still got some practice schedules from back in the day.
Sorry, Dan, that Czechoslovakia game against Brno was a post-season. That's what I've just found. It was at the end of a 5-day tour in France. That's the note I've got. Czechoslovakia, the old Brno in the old USSR. That must have been an experience walking into that. I think, if I remember rightly, that's the one Jason Colgan said they had like football, what would you call it? Like coming over where the players were on the bench, and they were like, "Why you got that?" And then when the game started and people were throwing stuff, and it's like, "Oh right, that's what." Can you remember that, Dan?
No, I don't, and that doesn't sound like something I'd forget. So, are you sure that was Portsmouth Basketball Club?
Yeah, this is Jason Colgan. Portsmouth played 5 games in 5 days in France and got all the way to Brno, Czechoslovakia, former USSR, post-season. I'm sure that was the one. He said there was one where there was something coming up. Yeah.
Man, I don't remember that. I don't remember that. I don't know if I was there then, actually. I don't, that might have been another year. I don't think we did that. But anyway.
Dan, sorry, just going back to something you said. I've got I think this is more of a personal question for you. When you're coaching a game and you've got referees who are letting the game get out of control, what can you do as a coach?
Ooh.
The reason I asked this question is because I'm trying to decide how controversial I should go. But the reason I asked this question is because I've seen some referees for certain teams, and I feel they let one team be more physical than another team. Mm-hmm. To the point I remember saying someone's going to get seriously hurt, and I've been saying that for about 4 or 5 years. Someone's going to get seriously hurt with this team because the referees are letting them be too physical. And so that's kind of where my question. And more recently, someone did get really, really seriously hurt against that team. And so that's why this is where this question comes from, where it's like, what as a coach during the game can you do to influence the referees to, I guess, not suck the whistle and allow physicality on one side and tip-tap fouls on the other, which sounds like your European fixture.
Yeah. Well, there in Yugoslavia, I don't think there was a whole lot could do except, obviously, point it out to the referees, and whatever you can to a certain extent. And then I guess, I don't know, is making the commissioner or somebody on the table aware, look, you see what's going on out there. Somebody is going to get hurt, and, it's only going to be a matter of time. Just stop, being fair. But a lot of times there really isn't a whole lot you can do at the moment. I've known coaches before maybe take, film from the game or something and send it into, the powers that be and say, look, this is what happened at our game. You can see here, this is, this isn't being refereed fairly. So I think at the time, there's not a whole lot you can do. I mean, you can scream and shout. Next thing you know, you got a technical, and then you're kicked out, and that is just going to make matters worse. Depends, but I've known coaches again who would do that just to make a stand and say, right, well, I'm going to take that chance of getting thrown out of the game because I'm going to protest to that extent that they kick me out. Now the referees are going to think, okay, we just kicked a coach out of the game. They don't do that very often, and so they might change their refereing style.
Yeah. But
that you take that chance. But if you see, and again, I've known coaches to do that because they think, well, it wouldn't have made any difference my being out there or not, because we were getting screwed out there.
Yeah.
And that wasn't going to change. So I went to the extent where, okay, I'm going to sacrifice myself. Hopefully you got an assistant on the bench there who can then, pick up, and the players will, come through. But you might just feel like, well, it's my being here isn't going to make any difference. So
yeah, I do remember Mick Byrne sitting like an assistant coach to him once, and Mick sometimes played a different game to everyone else on the court. It was like everyone was playing checkers, he was playing chess, that kind of thing. And I remember once he was like, right, Paul, watch this, I'm going to do this. And he shouted something out to the referee, got a technical foul. And then he just turned around to me and they went, now watch the game and watch how many calls we get. And I was like, okay. Yeah. And all of a sudden, we're getting all these calls. And I was like, wow. Like he was playing a whole different game inside the game of basketball.
Yeah, I mean, that can happen as well. You're taking a chance, but again, if it's the refereeing is that poor, that you've got to do something other than just sit there, stand there, and take it. Right, I got to make a stand. I worked with a guy, Kevin Cadle. I was assistant to him in London Towers in the mid '90s, and he would be up there and out there, and he would get a tee and what have you. So he was one who would say his piece, and so it's that's one strategy, So I don't know if there's a one strategy that will work every time, but that is one. I know coaches will do that if they find that they're getting screwed that bad, that all right, I got to make something happen here, do something. And so
yeah,
I remember one one coach, Tom Wisman, who was from way back in the day. He coached at Crystal Palace and at Solent. He coached at Solent as well for a couple of years, I believe, a year at least. Anyway, they were playing at Wembley, and they were playing in the semifinal. I was at Crystal Palace, and we were watching their game. And he got fed up with the refereeing. He just took a shoe and just threw it out on the court, because he just, what was going on? You guys are really screwed up. So he took his shoe and just threw it out on the court. So naturally, they had to stop the game, give him a technical foul, and
that's brilliant.
So I don't remember what happened after that. I just remember standing on the side like, yeah, did you see that? I've never seen that before. But he just, and I think it depends on the personality, personality of the person. He, that would be a Tom Wisman thing, him doing something like that. But American coach, he was an American coach at coached over here.
All right, we'll have to remember that one. We have to use that one. Get a shoot.
That is so creative. Yeah. It's genius, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, dear. Thank you very much for listening to this episode. That is the end of this part. But do not worry, because coming soon is the second part of this episode, and it will be available soon.